Hello everyone, I'm here today with another recommendation videos, and this time it's going to be books that deal with science without necessarily being sci-fi or anything like that. There's a couple of sci-fi here, but not necessarily. So yeah, most of them are novels or some kind of fiction. So yeah, let's get into the books. So the first one I have to recommend is Little Gods by Meng Jin. So this book deals with the relationship between a mother and a daughter, and they are originally from China, but they go to the US. And it is a complicated relationship also because of the father of the daughter. But the reason why it's in this list is because the mother is a really smart physicist. That's part of the reason why they managed to go to the US. She makes physics the way that she understands the world. So when the daughter asks about how certain things work, the explanation of the mother is very likely to be related to thermodynamics or stuff like that. And I just really found that part of the novel really interesting and relatable in a way, because I do deal with physicists all the time in my work and in my daily life. A lot of my friends are physicists or engineers, and I am a scientist myself. So I can really relate to the way in which this woman thought and all the little details, scientific details that it contains. And I thought it was a brilliant way to merge science into a novel and a story, which is mostly human story, but it still has these touches of science that I loved. So yeah, that's the first one. The next one I want to recommend to you is The Overstory by Richard Powers. I have recommended this one a lot. It's a very popular book. It's basically, it starts like short stories of different characters. I think there are like 12 or 13 characters, and their relationships with nature, and it evolves into one story relating nature and what we are doing to nature at the moment, but also about the science of how trees work and how they communicate and how they are a lot more complex than we think they are. There is in particular this one character, Patricia, that is a scientist that studies the communication of trees within roots, so that they can send signals through the roots to communicate with other trees and kind of make a community, which is a lot different from what we normally think about a forest as a collection of singular trees rather than a community. And I think that for that thing alone, it is already very valuable, but on top of that, the story, I think it's one that needs to be told. And when I first heard about this book, I never realized like how is a novel going to work, a novel about trees, but it does work, and I am really happy that this exists and that a lot of people are reading it. And if you haven't, go for it. I think it's worth a try. The next one is another popular one in booktube, and that's The Housekeeper and the Professor by Yoko Ogawa. And this one is about a housekeeper and a professor. So there is this mathematics professor, that is losing his memory. He has about 80 or 90 minutes of memory, and when 8 minutes pass, he forgets basically everything. And he has had a series of housekeepers in his house because it's very difficult for people to take care of him because he cannot remember anything that he stole. And he has all these post-its all over his body to be able to remember things. So in this book we see this new housekeeper come into the house and take care of him and create this bond, not only with the housekeeper but also the housekeeper's son. And that bond is mainly done through mathematics and through baseball. And also the relationship between the two things, because sports have a lot of numbers if you want to go there. So yeah, I thought that this is really heartwarming if you are going into, if you want something that's going to be warm but still be smart and have substance, I think this is a great pick for you. And again, if you love mathematics, you probably will also love that. The next couple I have are classics. So the first one is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Obviously, Frankenstein is the doctor that builds this human thing from parts of other humans, and then with electricity he is able to bring it to life. And this is at the time when electricity was first being introduced in society, and it reflects the fears that people had of electricity at that time. And yeah, I think that this one in particular explores the nature of what makes us humans and what makes us monsters very well. And yeah, I think it is really, if you have never read Frankenstein, I think it's worth a try. I think the writing style is very direct, but the topics that it touches upon are quite interesting, and that Frankenstein's monster, who is the monster kind of thing, it's really poignant. And it also reflects the fears that societies have when a new technology is introduced. And the other classic I have is Flatland by Edwin Abbott. This is kind of a novella. It's very, very short, and it has quite a misogynistic parts in it, so I understand if it's not for everybody. But I think that the concept in itself is so out there and so targeted for scientists and mathematicians, or people that like science and mathematics. So this is basically about a two-dimensional triangle basically discovering that there is a third dimension, because he sees a sphere like change size. And yeah, it plays with dimensions a lot and how we would see things if we were 2D or 3D or 1D. And it's very cool. It's very, very cool. I think that if you like geometry and mathematics, you are going to like this. If you are able to be past the social things that happen at that time. But I think that still, like, it's such a concept that I've never seen anywhere else, that it blew my mind when I read it. So maybe it will blow your mind too. The next one I have, connecting a little bit back to Frankenstein, is actually a play, and it's In the Next Room, or the Vibrato play by Sarah Ruhl. So this one is set around the 1850s as well, but it's more modern. It was published, I think, in 2010, but it's set in that time, and it's basically a play that about a family that it's the man is a doctor that treats women with hysteria, and the way that he does, it's the 1850s, so again it's when electricity was being introduced in society. And one of the first things that they did, apparently, was to invent vibrators, because they thought that they cure women hysteria. So this man, this doctor, uses vibrators on women to cure their hysteria. And the woman is really, the wife of the doctor is very curious about what's happening in his practice, because she hears all this screaming and stuff, and she's like, oh, what's happening there? And she also wants to try this vibrator because it sounds like they enjoy it. So yeah, it's hilarious. It's very, very comical. There is also this woman that is wet nurse of a child, and she is really confused about the fact that apparently all these very proper white women never had an orgasm with their husbands, and they never try to please them. They just go there for their own purpose, and that's why they need this treatment with the vibrator, and it's a whole thing. And I think it's really, really funny, and I haven't heard a lot of people discussing this, but I think that if that sounds anything that you might be interested in, I will really recommend to pick it up, because it's hilarious. And normally I listen to plays in audiobook, because then they can do the voices, but in this one in particular, there is, in the written book, there are indications for for the actors that are also hilarious, because there are things like, well, when you're doing an orgasm on on a play, you have to be quite loud, but actually, like, this idea that orgasm have to be loud, it's a performative thing that we have learned, and they don't really need to. So there's notes like that in the play as well, for the actors that are playing them, and I think it's just hilarious. I really enjoyed this one, and I would recommend. The next one that I have, it's a little bit of more into the sci-fi, and that is Solaris by Stanislaw Lem. And I read this a long time ago, but still is in my mind because I thought that the idea was very innovative as well. I don't know what I would think about it if I read it now. I know some people have tried it and DNF'd it, but at the time when I read it, I thought it was very interesting. Basically, the idea is that there is a certain amount of people that go into planets and explore planets and try to put colonies in different planets. So the novel focuses on this one planet that it seems to be all ocean, and they managed to make some kind of boat submarine thing to live there, or try to live there. And the person that lives there eventually kind of realizes that the ocean is not just a body of water, but it has a mind of itself, and how that mind works. And that realization that we tend to assume, a little bit like the Overstory, we tend to assume that things are just a collection of little parts and that it's all the same, rather than a community and a thing that has an ocean. So this book plays with that, and I thought that that idea was a really interesting thing to explore. And yeah, I read it a long time ago, but I'm actually looking forward to reread it when I can, because it was really interesting when I read it long time ago. So I will want to visit it and see if it actually stands the test of time. The next one I have, it's one that has been in the International Booker this year, and that's When We Cease to Understand the World by Benjamin Labatut. So When We Cease to Understand the World is sort of a non-fiction essay kind of thing, and it follows different scientists throughout history, and it looks into what they discover, but it also looks into their moral and their reaction to what they studied. It's basically the idea that when you find something so new and so genius, it messes your understanding of the world, and it messes your mind completely, because it's so different from anything that you previously thought and you previously believed. So yeah, it's basically about how your brilliancy and your genius within science and your discoveries of a completely new way to understand the world can stop you from understanding the world and stopping you from knowing how to survive and how to live a normal life and how to interact with other people. And I didn't completely love this one, but I think it touches in very interesting topics that I have never seen before, and there are things as well that I think are worth discussing. So yeah, and a lot of people have loved it. I think partly because I read it in Spanish, and the Spanish version sounded weird to me. That might have affected my enjoyment of the book, but other than that, I think it's a brilliant book that it's very different and the discussion is very different. So yeah, those were all the books that I wanted to discuss. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think about any of the books I have talked about. And until next video, bye!